Today's topic is a great one. Taking my fantasy football team from forgettable to formidable using AI. Welcome, and thank you for joining me. I have been engaged in the AI space for some time, and that hardly makes me an expert. I consider AI to be a great tool, but not a great solution. So I need to understand what I'm doing so I can tell AI how to help me the best. When it comes to changing the way we look at sports performance, baseball led the way. In 2011, the movie Moneyball talked about replacing one star at a position with two players, and the ability of those two people to duplicate the performance of that one person who previously was in that spot. We're going to take that same approach to football, and we're going to need to come up with our own terms because the advent of data analytics into baseball brought with it a ton of new terminology. We're going to use the term engine. Let's begin with the engine that begat all engines. Anyone playing fantasy football in 2003 knew about the greatest engine that ever lived, the Kansas City running back engine. Priest Holmes, Larry Johnson. What did it mean to have this amazing early 2000s engine? If you wanted Priest Holmes back in 2003, 2004, 2005, he was usually a top 2 pick. But if you took him, you better take Larry Johnson, because if you didn't, someone else would. He was unbelievable. First, look at 2003 and what Priest Holmes did. If you played fantasy last year, the two top running backs each got about 350 fantasy points during the season and played just about every game. Priest Holmes in 2003 played about every game and ended up with 445 total fantasy football points for an average almost 28 points a game. We're going to look at last year's stats in a minute. 22 led the league in fantasy points per game. He was a touchdown better than the best running back, Saquon Barkley. He was a touchdown better than Barkley in 2003. Take a look at his last 5-6 games. Cleveland, 35 points in week 10, 31 against Oakland week 12, then 35, 27, 19, 34, and 20. You have to be kidding me. So, when 2004 came along, what happened if you had spent a top 2 pick on Priest Holmes and then grabbed Larry Johnson in the 7th round? Priest Holmes did Priest Holmes things, including a 35-point game, a 25-point game, and 2 40-plus point scoring games. And then he got hurt. And the thing is, tough to find records for week 10 and 11. I think fantasy football broke, and it took a couple weeks to fix it. It's the only explanation I can come up with. Let's treat that as gospel. Larry Johnson comes in with a 12-point game against San Diego and then goes nuclear the rest of the season, never less than 25 points. If you used Priest Holmes in the first half of the season, Larry Johnson the second half of the season, you averaged almost a touchdown more than the best running back last year in fantasy football. They were incredible. And of course, by the third year, you knew Priest was going to get hurt. You knew both of them were amazing. Take a look at the first half of the season. Priest Holmes delivered, as he always did, finishing up with a 23-point game against Miami, getting hurt against San Diego the following week. And then Larry Johnson came in with 31, 35 a couple weeks later, a 38, a 32, a 34, finishing off the year with 42 points. He averaged over 32 points a game the second half of the year. Had you just taken both players, played Priest until he got hurt, then put Larry in like you did the year before, that total 420 fantasy points and over 26 points per game. Over 4 points better than the best running back from last year. That was 25 years ago. Let's talk about last year. I think there might have been a better engine than this one sitting right in front of our faces. Here's the performance in fantasy football by the top 25 running backs last year. There were 4 running backs that kind of set themselves apart. However, the difference between a Derrick Henry and an Alvin Kamara, less than a yard. But if we look at total points, there were 4 that scored almost 350 points, and then we do see a drop off. So while on a game by game basis, we can see the difference of how the top 5 scored week to week versus how the next 5 scored, fairly close. And even more so, if we look at number 10 through number 25, we can see that on a per game basis, they were only separated by a point or two. Am I confident that the people that put together the statistics for next year have accurately guessed the number of yards and touchdowns within 10%? Or could they be as much as 20% off? If one player scores 20% less points than they guess, and another player 20% more points, that could easily be a difference of almost 100 points, maybe even more. When we look at tiers, maybe it's better to look at it from a standpoint of truly exceptional and everybody else who's pretty good. Because year over year, it's hard to capture which one of those players is going to do 10 to 20% better than the other. And we all know this big group here usually has a couple players at the top, and the rest is all over the place. The way you win in fantasy football actually shows up on most websites in the matchup before your week. It looks like this little graph over here where, hey, I'm projected to win by 5 points. We're going to look for places where we can get one of these spots to outperform other people's highest ADP player in that spot. Last year's engine that could have been better than that Kansas City engine was the Detroit engine of Gibbs and Montgomery. At the end of the year, Jahmyr Gibbs finished second overall in fantasy football points per game, and Montgomery at almost 16 points. The neat part about this is they were startable in both running back spots, and we sort of knew that going into the season because Montgomery was used extensively around the goal line. Gibbs was used extensively within the 20s. And they ran the ball a ton in Detroit behind an amazing offensive line, a really gifted offensive coordinator, which meant lots of yards, lots of touches for both players. Also, the running game for Detroit was an inherent part of their offense. So if one player was out, the other one was going to get a ton of work. So what would it have cost you last year to get both of these players to put in both your starting running back and your second running back spot? Now, Gibbs, maybe not quite as much as Priest Holmes, but he's a high first-round pick, right? Montgomery, on the other hand, kind of known as a sixth-round pick. That's really high for a backup. It's because he was almost a 1B to Gibbs in 2023. And it was obvious that unless they changed coordinators, which they didn't, or had huge issues on their offensive line, which they didn't, Montgomery was going to get the ball a ton. If we look at their performance matched up against an average running back 1 and an average running back 2, for Gibbs, he outscored the average of the top 12 running backs by 3 points a game. Montgomery almost a full point above. So if I used my first and sixth round pick last year on Gibbs and Montgomery and started them both every week, I essentially averaged 4 points better than the best running back I was facing and the second best running back I was facing week over week. That's not nothing. If we take a look at actual performance, in week 1, that pair averaged 16.5 points each, a total of 33 points. Green will show you what the top 5 running backs averaged last year. Yellow shows you what the next 5. So essentially, green or yellow means a top 10 running back performance. In week 1, they both played like top 10 running backs. That was true the first 5 weeks. 1, 2, 3, 4 additional weeks, they each averaged a top 5 running back performance. Not only is this almost a top 5 performance combined, look what happened to Gibbs when Montgomery went out. 25, 26, and 46. So obviously an engine that not only performed all year by beating the averages of both the best running back on the team you faced and the second best running back on the team you faced, this engine was amazing because it filled 2 spots. It allowed you 13 picks to pick the rest of your squad. Incredible performance. So were there other engines you could have used to succeed in 2024's fantasy football season? Definitely. The Tampa Bay scenario was one that we heard about in training camp. Rachaad White coming off a great year, a 4th round pick. Bucky Irvin, the rookie, probably looking at about the 10th round. And the word throughout training camp was Rachaad White's the starter and Bucky Irvin will get some work. So I have a starting player coming off a top 10 year who's being devalued because there's another player out there that may take some snaps. We can see that Rachaad White was definitely a 3-down back, probably as good, if not better, at catching the ball than running the ball. And we see a Bucky Irvin, and he appears to us to be a catching 3rd down back. And so that brought a lot of confusion as to who would I take and who's going to perform better. Tampa Bay's had a strong running game with a lot of usage for a long time. Whoever's back there is going to get the ball a ton. Worst case scenario, I get a top 10 running back from the previous year. It's going to see a slight reduction in usage. And I now have an extraordinarily capable backup performing well in preseason. So you grab both backs. Well, these two guys ended up being number 21 and 22 on the year. You could have started each one almost the entire season. Other great 2024 running back engines, man, Green Bay's and Miami's, because you could use their starter and because both teams had 2 good running backs on the bench. Even if someone in my league grabbed one and held them in case my starter got hurt, I could just grab the other one off waivers. Chances are they'd probably get about as many touches as the backup that was being held. That gave me a running back I expected to have number 1 running back performance, and I didn't have to carry a roster spot for their backup if something happened to them. Now, just like the Carolina situation, there was one in Cleveland where Chubb was coming back from an injury. They had Ford there as well. I don't believe the statistics hold up for how powerful that engine was versus the Carolina one, but it does bring in the last theme of this video today, is simply that I don't have that data in front of me because it's not easy to get the data out of AI. So it's time for you to make a choice. Do you care at all about the AI stuff, or you just want to win in fantasy football? If it's the second and you just want a winner, I have the answer for you. If you care about AI, hang on for about a minute after I explain how data analytics drives human behavior so strongly that you can count on it to get the guys in the draft that you wanted going in. Here's how that works. If you're picking 1, 2, or 3, there are some neat ways you can take advantage of picking 2 players very close to each other. If you're picking between 3 and 9, you can choose before the draft players you want on your team, and then you're going to get them if you follow these couple of rules. Your first pick, take your favorite player of the top 20 remaining. I just say the top 20 because if your favorite player is lower than that, just wait, don't use your first round pick on them. But this is the place that the person who's really good, the person you like to watch, take that person. Don't worry about the position they play. It's going to work out. Now, for your second round pick, anyone with an ADP over 20 can be yours. With your next pick, anyone with an ADP between 30 and 50 can be on your team. And that's about the time we make decisions, because we've gotten through our elite players by the time we've gotten to the 20th pick. If we look back from last year's finish for running backs, there was only 4 of them that really showed exceptional performance in comparison to the rest. So once we get past that first, second round, we're in this area where 10 to 20% change in stats, and any one of these can be bumped up above the other. And that's when you can start taking the power of these engines and putting it to work. Now, for those of you that are interested in the AI space, that want to learn a bit more how to incorporate that into your life, there's another video or 2 coming. I'm finding fantasy football to be a terrific use case for AI because it is analytics driven and it has large lists of people and statistics associated with those people. Most of us are familiar with a CRM, a repository of customer data. AI is really good at finding patterns in data. So developing a CRM, a repository for these statistics will allow AI to work better in finding anomalies and advantages. I got more engines I'm seeing for 2025 and how we can start paying attention to them now to see if they're draftable in a month or two. Thank you for joining me. Have a great day.